Good evening and happy Friday. Cheers. Just my water. Hope everyone had a great week. We've had some good weather. We've got some good weather coming up too. So welcome once again to Painting Cocktails Facebook Live Paint Night. Tonight we are going to be doing Bobcaygeon. And we got that title from the Tragically Hip, my favorite band, Paul Gord. Alright, so the colors we need for today are a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, some white, a little bit of black, and a bit more yellow. Just like that. Alright, and the brushes we need, just our usual 3 brushes. So your 1-incher. Maybe 1/2 inch or smaller, whatever you've got, and a small one. These are our 3 brushes, big, medium, and little. Right. And you need, of course, your cup of water. My cat's probably going to steal from all the paint. And some napkins, of course, a paper towel folded up so you can clean off your brushes. And once again, a little preview about the paint we're using. It's an acrylic paint. That's one I'm using. If you're using acrylic, that's great. Try not to use oils. If you should get some paint on your fingers, no problem, they'll scrub off. If you get paint on your clothing, make sure you get to it right away. Lots of warm water, scrub well, and it should come off no problem, okay? Don't leave it overnight because it won't come off in the morning. And if you should get paint elsewhere, it will scrub off. I use one of those kitchen scrubbies, and they scrub off good. Okay, I think we're going to get started. So I don't know what size canvases you like to use, but I always use my 16 by 20. This is a painting that you can do both vertically or horizontally. Either way is fine. And we're going to be starting off with yellow. I'm going to be using the big brush. A little dip in the water, tap out, dab on the napkin, both sides of the brush, and this time I'm going to scrape off so I end up with a nice thin look. I'm going to be using that wedge like that to draw a straight line right basically down the center, as straight as you can get it, just across the center like that. And then I'm going to refresh the brush, scrape off, less is more here, and I'm going to draw a triangle, essentially from up here down to this corner here. So I've got myself a triangle. And I'm going to paint all of this inside the triangle yellow. That's it. So for the next few minutes, grab both sides of your brush. This time load up the paint, and we're going to paint in the direction of this angle here. We're going to fill in all of this in just straight yellow. We don't have to be too careful about following the line. You can go over the line a little bit, that's allowed. I dip in my brush in the water a little bit just to loosen up the paint a little. If it's a little thick, sometimes it can happen if your paint gets a little older, much like me. It's loosening up. And fill that all in just yellow. We're going to be doing a lovely sunset here. You don't have to, remember, you don't have to exactly copy what I'm doing. And if you're worried about that this picture, the one you're doing, is not going to turn out exactly like that, well, you're right, it won't, and that's really the point. Neither will mine. Every time you use the paint, it's going to come out a little different. And we like to call it similar but different. That's why it's art, not photocopying. Alright, we're just going to fill in there. On the bottom, you can go this way. If you look at the painting, this bottom line is going to be black anyway, so you don't have to worry too much. Just fill in the sky, cover all the white canvas in that triangle, get it covered up. Make sure you've got paint on both sides of the brush so that you can go back and forth. You see how quickly I'm going? Why am I going a little quick? Because, remember, acrylic paint dries really, really fast. really fast, which is great unless you want to make a blends. We want to make blends. See this? We want to blend in here. So there's this this triangle. Now you could say you're done. This is an abstract piece of art. Put it in a museum. Awesome. But if we want to continue with the sunset, we're going to make some orangey red. So to make sure that we've actually got enough wet paint that we can start blending, I'm going to freshen up my brush again, refresh the brush up again with some paint. And along the long line here of the triangle, I'm going to add some more wet yellow paint to this line. And now I'm going to dip a little bit, get a little bit of red, maybe the top of my brush, that much of red. I'm going to go along the same line. And I'm going to go all the way across that triangle and up and lightly, lightly, lightly back and forth. And I'm going to start blending into some of that yellow. Blend across, just lightly using my brush. Nice long strokes, back and forth. Oh, my brush is dry. So I'm going to get some more paint. I'm going to bring some of that up into the white canvas up here. So you can see already this is more orangey, this is more red. You can go over again in some yellow to help blend that in. What we don't want to see is a sharp dividing line of color. Think of a rainbow. You've got those sharp lines of color that delineate one color from another. We don't want that. We want soft blend. And that's going to be more difficult if your paint is dry. No problem. We can work that out by adding some more yellow, some more red. And ultimately, if you've still got a hard line, we're going to throw a little bit of white on top as well. White's the magic paint that will soften everything up. So I'm going to bring this up here. Just back and forth, back and forth. I want to fill that in. Refresh and get some more paint on my brush. Cover up my white canvas up to this point. Now we're going to be putting blue in this part up here. So we're going to basically stop there for now. Keep blending back and forth. So maybe I want to add some more yellow on here. I'd like to be this a bit more orangey. So I'm not cleaning my brush. I'm just dipping into a corner of my yellow. I'm going to go over some of this red, right on top, back into the yellow. Get some more yellow, go on top. Got a bit more yellow on top of the red. Just blend that in, blend back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Again, don't worry about this. This is pretty ragged down here, but remember, we're going to be putting some mountains in the background, some hills. So don't worry about that. So you should end up with your own version of a bit of a sunsetty sky. Okay, so the next step is we're going to add some blue here, but before we do that, we want to make sure this is nice and fresh. So I'm going to grab some fresh red, throw that on top of that line there. Quite a bit of it, because I want it to be wet. Now I'm not cleaning my brush. I'm just going to grab some blue. What happens when you mix red and blue? It's going to turn purpley. A bit of blue on my brush. I'm going to start blending in this part right here. Bring it back up to the corner. And you're going to get a blue streak, some purple streaks coming in right across. And then lightly, 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 I'm just going to start dragging that some of that blue color into my red sky. Across like that. Pretty random, just nice and light, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just start throwing that in, just to give that hint of blue behind the sunset there. I'm happy with that. You end up with something like that. Remember, you can paint standing up, you can paint on an easel, you can paint horizontally. Whatever works for you is good. So now I'm going to clean my brush and I'm going to refresh with a little bit of white, and I'm going to put some white streaks into the sky in a second. So I'm just going to put my canvas down. And my cat is back. Hello there, buddy. Loves the fresh water for the paint. Say hello. Okay, down we go. So now I'm going to clean my brush. Stir, stir, stir. Scrub, 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 scrub. Tap, tap, scrape, scrape. Pretty clean, but the real cleaning comes on the napkin. Scrape, 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 dab, 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 scrub, scrub, scrub. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Lots and lots and lots of that. Clean brush. Awesome. Okay. Now, a little bit, just a little bit of white. So I'm just going to dab straight down into my white. A little bit of brush on the hand on the brush there. I'm going to use the tip of the brush, just lightly into the sky. Now, so you've got some pretty prominent white pieces. I'm just going to go over them a few times. Drag them across. See how often I'm doing that? Probably 30, 40 times. You end up with a bit of a streaky sky. All right, excellent. So now we're going to do water. But before we do that, we're going to mark out where we want the land to stop. Now you don't have to copy this exactly. We're going to get some yellow just on the tip of the brush. And I'm going to decide where I want my land. I'm just going to make a land marking down here. Do your own way. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. And between here and here, we're going to make this orangey water, and then we will paint the black on top. So now we want to mix up some paint on your canvas, on your plate to make up some orange. This is all water. It's all going to be kind of streaky, and it kind of reflects what's going on in the sky. So here's my plate, and I'm going to grab a little bit of red, not too much. I'm going to put it right into about half of my yellow. I'm going to mix that together. Red always wins, so you just need a wee little bit of it. And you can decide how orangey you want your water to be. I want my paint to be quite streaky, marble effect. Because as I paint, I want those streaks to show, because I want it to look watery, not solid. So you can see I've got a mix of paint there that's got red in it, orange in it, yellow in it. Way more yellow than red, like 100 to 1. Quite a bit of paint on my brush. And I'm going to be painting between here and here. Here and here. Just nice long streaks like this. And as you can tell, the canvas just eats the paint up right away. And you're going to have to keep refreshing, getting lots of paint on both sides of the brush. And we're going to fill that in as straight as possible. Now, I want you to remember that when we're doing horizontal things, our elbow can often make our arm act like a windshield wiper. And you don't want curvy water. You want to try and remember to get as straight as you can across from one edge to the other. You see the idea of how streaky that is? It gives the idea that you've got some water rippling on your canvas. I'm going to fill this whole thing in. And you can decide, once again, this is your choice, how orangey or yellowy you'd like to have this water. And you can change it as you go. As you keep adding more color, you're scooping up that puddle of color you've got on the go, you can change it. You can say, oh, I want to add some more yellow to that. Yeah, go right ahead. It's all good. And once again, we don't have to be too detailed about making sure that this line where the sky meets the water is exactly straight, because we're going to be putting black on it. It's very freeing. You don't have to be too detailed. What I want you to do is nice long strokes though. Get those blending of that orange and red and yellow together. So you end up with some sort of a watery effect. I make sure that it's somewhat horizontal for myself. It can be very tricky to do when you're standing up to get the right perspective to make sure that it is in fact horizontal. Right up to the landline. You can go over it because you don't have to be too fussy about getting it nice and neat, because that's all going to be black. Okay. Look at that. 2 minutes and it's done. Doesn't take long at all. I'm happy with that. So we've got some sky, roughly meets the water. We've got the water that roughly meets the land at the bottom. And we're going to let this dry. It takes about 5 minutes. Once that's dry, we're going to start with the black paint. And you could paint, because black always wins. Black is the dominant color. It wins, but ideally we want this to be at least tacky dry so that you're not starting to blend that color into the black. We want the black to be able to take hold on top of the canvas. Nice long strokes. We don't want road markings, line painting. We want it nice and long. Look at that. Didn't take long at all, did it? Hope you guys are caught up. Very good. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to clean this brush. And I'm going to switch to black in a second. So I'm just going to put this down. Stir, stir, stir. Those of you who do have a nice beverage on the go next to you, please remember this one's for dipping, the other one's for sipping. Don't mix them up. It can happen. Always tap out. Always lots of dabbing. Clean. So I'm going to be sticking to this brush. We're going to be painting the bottom ground. We're going to be painting the hills in whatever design you want to do. But just make one low enough that we're going to throw in the sun on top. Well, yes, the sunset. So you can start off high, you can go high, you can make the sort of the ones found in China. You can do low hills. In Bobcaygeon, they're pretty low hills. We don't have too many mountains. And we'll make them nice and low here, and we'll paint those in black. Then we'll start with the sun. Well, this will take a few coats of white paint. That means painting a thin layer first, letting it dry for a couple of minutes, then going back to it and doing another layer. And then we'll work on the trees. The trees are easier than they look. And we'll be switching brush to the medium brush when we do those trees. In the meantime, I'm going to stick with my big brush. Give it a little feel. Look at this. All no paint. Dries that quickly. So let's just give it a little minute or two. Look in the light. That's awesome. Okay, I'm ready to go. So, going to be dipping this into the black paint, both sides of the brush. Scrape off a little. And now you get to draw your land line again, just so you get a nice hard line. where the water meets. You can go slightly above the water line, so where you cover that, both sides of the brush, paint. This is the easy part. We're just painting this black. Most people love this the best. No stress. We've had many people tell us that painting is the most stress-free part of their day. It's like therapy. You get so absorbed into what you're doing with the painting, everything else disappears. I agree. Make sure you go right to the very edge of the canvas, so you're not having any white canvas showing. And if you need to turn your brush around a little bit to get the finer details up against the line, you can do that. Fresh. And once again, if you find that maybe your paint's a little too thick, you can just dip in the water and put your brush right into your black paint, swirl it around, and it will thin the paint out for you. Just sometimes happens. Yeah, done. The bottom part. Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the land line at the bottom of the hills where the water meets. So once again, I'm going to go to the black paint, both sides of the brush, and I'm going to push down on the plate and scrape off a little bit. I want to try and get a nice thin flathead screwdriver look on my brush. I'm going to try, as much as I can, to do as straight as line as possible across the water. So that's what I'd like you to do, as straight as a line as possible. Just steady across. Just kind of like that. Now at this point, I may switch up my brush to the medium brush. So I'm going to put this one into the water to rest. Get my medium brush, dip it in the paint, the black paint. Both sides, flat on the plate, scrape off. Once again, getting that screwdriver effect. I'm going to be using that front edge to draw whatever mountains or hills I want to do. And you decide. There's no right or wrong. You know, it's art, man. You can do whatever you like. I'm going to start off in the corner here, come down, come up, some hills. That sounds fine with me. And I'm going to paint all of that in black. Just paint that in. Now we want to be a little careful on our lines and our edges. The inside, of course, we can just paint away. Pretty soothing, grown-up coloring. There we go. The line, paint in the middle. Nice and easy. This is not difficult at all. Keep refreshing the brush. Paint up against the line. Paint your mountains. Hills, I guess we're right. Hills, there's no mountains. Not in Bobcaygeon. I hope you guys find this relaxing like I do. Really easy to do. No demands, there's no details of this part. This is easy. If you find your paint is a little too wet right now, the yellow underneath, just wait a couple of minutes. And you can actually let me know in the chat if you need me to stop for a few minutes for you to catch up. Just let me know. I'll keep this video available for a while on this page, on our group page. I'm going to need to add some more black paint in a second, I think. Yeah, I probably will to do some trees. I'm just going to hold this a little steady. As I get further away from my hand, it becomes a little unsteady. I was lucky enough to do a private party at a winery down in Grimsby last week for a bachelorette. That's lovely. The weather was perfect. Scenery was awesome. Had about 20 wonderful young ladies and their parents. So once again, keep in mind, if you'd like to do a private party, just contact us at info@paintandcocktails.com. Send you all the details. Both if you'd like to have an in-person event, which is allowed now, or if you're happy to do a virtual event, we can do that too. Alright, we got some hills. Some lower land, we have some hills. Gonna let this dry. I'm going to decide where we want to put our sun using a small brush in white. So I'm done for the moment with this. I'm not going to put it in the water. I'm just going to put it on my napkin because I will be returning to that brush to do the trees. I'll give you a couple of minutes here just to get caught up. All right. Awesome. And I've seen some people decide just to do an orange sky before with no red or blues in it. And that works too. Looks lovely. Okay, small brush, white paint. I roll the bristles in the paint, scrape off a little bit. And I'm going to decide where I want to put my sun. So, for this painting has it about here or in the dip. It's all good, wherever you want to put it. There's the circle, the setting sun. Now, that's the first coat. You may see it's quite transparent. Some of the yellow showing through. That's fully expected because it's only the first coat. We'll be adding some more later. Keep this brush aside too. Now it's time to do the trees. I'm going to start off with some tree trunks. I'm going to be using the medium brush again. Once again, holding it vertically like that. After I've dipped into the paint and scraped off, I need to decide where it is I want to put my trunks. I'm just going to go from the land up to however high I'd like to have them. There's a couple of them a little bent, so there's two here, and then two smaller trees in the middle here. So I'm going to need some more black paint. So excuse me 1 second. Add some more. This is what I use, just the Michaels Artist Loft Flow Acrylic. Just a little more. The black goes a long way. Dip, 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 both sides of the brush, flatten out and scrape off the side. I'm going to be using the front tip like this. Plant it firmly against the land, and I'm just going to drag it up. And then when I reach the top, I'm just going to come away from the canvas. Basically, squish and flick. You don't want to suddenly come up and stop dead. It makes it look like the top of the tree has been sheared off. A little flick away from the canvas gives it a nice taper. And this one I'm going to bend a little bit, put it next to here on the ground, up, 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 and I'm going to lean over to the right. I kind of do the same thing on the other side. If I want another 2 trees or just one, up to you. Straight up. And maybe this one will bend this way. All right. Now we can thicken up those trunks. These are jack pines. These 2 ones here are jack pines, these 4. And so they're not too wide, they're pretty thin. Freshen up the brush again, scrape off. And I'm just going to make that a little wider. Just continue up, 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 up. And then come away from the canvas. So just thicken that up a little bit. Do the same again on the other one. Just to thicken up that trunk. Nice and steady. It's a little too wide. I'll widen it more. Now you may have a very skinny tree, and that's fine. You can leave it there. But I like to just widen this a little bit. And the same again on the other one. Just to give it some substance. Remember to breathe when you paint. Don't hold your breath. Okay, now we're still going to be using this brush for the pine needles and the branches. And I love these jack pines, and they're actually fairly easy to do. Once again, we're going to go to the black paint, but this time I'm going to smush this brush down into the plate, into the paint, to kind of splay those bristles a little bit. Mush, mush, straight down a few times. So as you can see, I've now got kind of a splayed bristle. I'm going to pick my first tree. I'm going to go slightly above the top of the tree with a straight on jab, boop, very lightly, like that. And I'm going to then now rotate my brush horizontally, and let's say we'll start on the right side. The jack pines tend to have odd shaped branches. You've got a little bit on one side, more on the other. A little bit on one side, more on the other, and back and forth like that. So I'm going to dab, 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 not too hard, but continuing to dab, bring that over, a little bit on this side, bring it over, dab, 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 a little bit on this side, a little bit on this side, just continuing to dab, right over the mountains. On one side. Now they're getting wider as we get lower. So smaller up top, dab, dab, straight down. I'm refreshing my brush and just dabbing it straight down, straight down. Bristles are like that. Turn it on its side. Come on one side, come over. One side, I'll use that a little bit longer. Over like that. Dab, 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 dab. Across to the very edge. Now, I will be, and I want to show you here because they're a little bit further apart, I'm going to fill in the trunk with some dabbing too. Come over. Let's extend some of those a little bit. Okay. I'm going to go over this now. This is just the bones of this tree, but I think it's a pretty good image of a tree. I'm going to I've got too much paint on there. I don't need nearly enough of that, as much as that. Scrape that off. Punch down onto the plate. I'm going to add some of these leaves, these pines, right up the trunk, just lightly. And as the branches get lower, they get fuller. Sometimes they're quite heavy. So I'm just going to grow this out a little bit and a little bit down. See, a little bit down. Over and down. Over and down a little bit. Down a little bit. Less is more. You don't need much paint on your brush. Add a little. Some hang down a bit, some don't hang down at all. The lower ones tend to hang. Not bad. Now we'll do another one. Refresh the brush, smoosh down, pick your tree, start off vertically, switch it around horizontally, a little bit to the left, more to the right, a little bit to the right, more to the left, zigzagging down, little kind of Z shapes, more random, left and right, down the trunk, left and right, down the trunk, left and right, jabbing in place a few times, across, kind of meets the tree there, the bottom ones are getting a little wider, down the trunk, over top. I'm going to freshen up the brush again, and I'm going to go some hangy parts down the trunk, some hangy parts, bring that down a little bit, up the trunk, going over these branches, just adding some more depth to the tree. Now we have two trees. We're going to repeat that process for these ones, but the center ones are regular Christmas tree style triangle trees. So once again, the brush gets smooshed down into the plate, into my paint, move it aside a little bit, make sure I don't have too much on there. Start vertically, dab, dab, a couple verticals, switch it horizontal, a little shorter branches, a little to the left, a little to the right, a little to the right, to the left, right across the mountains, a little to the right, a little to the left, more to the right, to the left, a little bit to the right. And once again, I'm going to go up the trunk where the branches start, just down the middle here. And I'm going to add some hangies. Pretty random. Repeat on the other one. Mush the brush straight down, base blade, do the tip, a little to the right, more to the left, a little to the left, more to the right, a little to the right, more to the left, a little to the left, more to the right, a little to the left, more to the right, to the right, more to the left, right across the other tree. Continue that down the trunk, a little to the right, more to the left, a little to the left, more to the right. Down the trunk a little, to the right, to the left, and to the left, to the right. And then I'm going to go up the trunk again. Dab, 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 just up the trunk. freshen my brush. Dab, 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 straight down. Scrape, scrape, dab, dab. And you do lightly touch, light touch. Do some hangies that come down like this. See that okay? Just sort of adding another depth to the branch, going over the top of it. And especially when it reaches the end, we can just bring it down, hanging a little bit. Okay, we got a few jack pine trees. Awesome. Okay. Put that down for a second. I'm going to, my brush is pretty lumpy with paint. That's too much. I'm going to scrape that off on the side of the plate like that. Get some fresh paint on the brush, scrape it off. I want to get that screwdriver effect again. And I'm going to do a couple of little trees. Start from the bottom, straight up, nice and light. Nice and light. Flick off the end there. Once again, I'm going to turn, actually I'm going to add, excuse me, I'm going to add a couple of dabs at the top. Dab, dab very lightly. And I'm going to turn my brush horizontally. And I'm going to start off with just a few dabs at the top. Very, very lightly. Very lightly. But I'm not leaving gaps like here. I'm not making one side longer than the other. I'm just making a triangle out of my dabs. Dab, 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 dab. Just lightly tapping the front of the bristles against the canvas. They've been splayed. I'm just making them wider and wider to make that Christmas tree triangle. Right down to the ground. And onto the ground. Okay, there's the bones of that tree. I'm going to do it again. Mush, mush, mush. Freshened up. Going to go up the trunk. I always like to go up the trunk. Like that. And then I'm going to do it again. Second layer. On the top, coming down. You can be a little random on the sides. Sometimes the branches stick out. Go between the branches, back and forth. Dab, dab, dab. Just doing the very, very front end of that brush, those bristles. Back and forth, back and forth. You end up with a tree. And repeat the same thing on the other side. Down on the top. Start off very lightly. I'm just going to dab, dab, dab in place. Left and right. So getting wider and wider as we go down. Just like a lovely triangle pine Christmas tree. Nice and light, not too hard. Back and forth, right to the ground. Go up the trunk. Dab, 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 dab. Refresh. And do it again. I'll start from the bottom this time. Cross. Dab, 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 dab. Pretty random. Just filling in some of the gaps there. As we go up to the top of the tree, getting smaller and smaller branches. Just dab, 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 straight on. And at the top again, I now turned vertically, just added a bit more tip to that tree. And we're done. If you want to make it a little wider, you can. You can have as wide a tree as you want. As dense a tree as you want, just by adding more paint. Okay, I'm done with this brush. I'm going to go back to my small brush, white paint, give it a little roll in the paint. Go back over your setting sun. A nice second layer of white paint there. So now most of that paint's gone off my brush. I'm going to use that for a bit of reflection. I'm going to go right into the water and gently scrape back and forth in a line like this. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And if we want to add some birds, stick with the small brush, get some white paint. I'm going to find a little corner of black to mix that in to make a light gray. Just a light gray. Roll the brush. I'm going to make a couple of birds here. Mustaches. I want you to think of mustache shape. They're kind of like an M, but it's not a McDonald's M. It's not a V. It's a mustache. So it's kind of a spread out M. Find a spot in the sky. Keep your brush against your canvas and make a mustache. End up with a bird. Another one here. Mustache. There's another bird. And then we're done. That's it. That's our painting. If you want to make the leaves, the pines a little darker, you can. If you want to fill it in, you can. If you want to add anything, a swimmer or canoeist in there, you can. This is your painting. But remember, the last thing you need to do is sign it. And typically it's the bottom right corner. Of course, we should use a lighter color this time. Add some your initials. GP for Gary Parker, that's me. And there you have Bobcaygeon. Your own version of Bobcaygeon. So congrats guys, thank you for joining me. Hope you had fun. I'll wait just a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, ask them away in chat, let me know. Otherwise we're done and we'll see you in about 2 weeks. I hope you had fun. Thanks for joining us again. Good night.